Good morning, YouTube. This is the Fat Health Teacher checking in. Today is Sunday, and I thought it would be very appropriate to talk religion at this point. I do talk to my students about religion. I talk with them about what their beliefs are, what my kind of history with religion is, and I wanted to share that with you because it's a very important thing to me. Um, so, I was raised Mormon. And for those of you who don't know, that's also known as the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter day Saints. Now, we were really active up until the point where I was about 6, and then my parents had a falling out with the local church. So after that point, we really only do church when we were traveling. Okay, and it was a little uncomfortable because we were usually not as well dressed. We were strangers to the ward, and so you would get the questions like, "Are you members? Are you people who are visiting who might be interested in converting? Like, what's going on?" Well, I didn't like that feeling. I didn't like how unwelcome we sometimes felt in the wards that we went to, and so I started looking into other religions, and I discovered that one of my ancestors was Quaker. And the idea of being Quaker was a bit romanticized for me because, Underground Railroad and there were some other things that were connected to it. But I thought, oh, this sounds like a good plan. And the more I expressed my interest in becoming Quaker, the more I think my parents realized that it was important that if they wanted me to be Mormon, that we all as a family start going back to church. So probably when I was in eighth or ninth grade, we started going back to church. The missionaries came over. They gave their lessons, and eventually I was baptized. My sisters were baptized, and finally, I believe that my brother was baptized as well. Um, so we were Mormon, and I did all the Mormon things that you're supposed to do. We went and I did the seminary class. I remember going to youth group on Wednesday nights. And another thing that you may or may not be interested in is that going to church on Sundays for Mormons can be at minimum 3 hours. I was actively Mormon up through my first couple of years of college. And then at that point, I made a couple of life decisions that were contrary to what was considered appropriate for the Mormon church. And we sort of had a falling out. We eventually left our college town, and when we moved to the new place, I tried to be active, but I still felt like an outsider. And this was really not the fault of anyone within the religious community. I just had some big differences in how I approach things. I had a hard time with the idea of giving my life over to the church, with having the church pretty much drive every choice that I was making. I wasn't willing to do that. And so I stopped going to church. I got divorced, and then I went back to church again. I actually purchased a whole bunch of books. I would study for an hour every morning. I was convinced that my falling away from the church was the reason that my first marriage failed. And then the more work that I did, the more I realized that it just wasn't a fit for me. It didn't match my moralities or my code of ethics. And a big part of that was I believe in moderation, whereas the church has some very firm stances um, on different things that are definitely not moderate, that are definitely not accepting. An example would be it's okay if you're gay as long as you're not acting on it, which seems ridiculous to me because if you're gay, then that's a huge part of your life, and to not be able to act on it doesn't make any sense. Another issue that I had was that when it came to human sexuality, it was abstinence only, period. Like there were no other options. Unless you were married, you could not address those physical needs at all. You were just supposed to suppress them forever. No alcohol. Um, you're not supposed to have caffeine. Depending on how strict you wanted to be, you weren't supposed to be on birth control. Uh, there were a lot of conflicts in ideology. So I don't slam the church, and I don't think that it's a bad church. I disagree with some of the things that they do, such as supporting Prop 8 in California a few years ago. Really do hold to a higher standard. And within that church, there are some very good people, and there are some very good lessons to learn. I think that the idea of of being prepared for a a famine is important because they are proponents of a 2-year food storage. Having plans for emergencies, also important. Having skills that can be useful, such as canning and quilting and sewing, and all of that is useful. But my other really big challenge with the religion is the proselytizing. So, for those of you who are unfamiliar with the word, proselytizing is basically sharing your faith with another person with the intention of converting them to your faith, of telling them that, hey, your church and your religion is wrong, whatever you believe is wrong, and this is the better way to believe. And if you don't believe correctly, then you're not going to go to a nice place after you die. Okay? I've moved away from that a lot, and part of the reason I moved away from this is because when I was in college and I was active, prior to my first marriage, I met a guy who I was interested in, and we kind of talked. We were doing a lot of talking online. It was unique because online was just becoming a thing. Like the internet that we have now did not exist in that way. There were message boards and there was email, but it was you would consider it primitive based on if you were to compare it to what we have now. So he had started going to this church. It was relatively new for him, and there were a few things about it that made him uncomfortable. And every time he shared those things that made him uncomfortable, I took that opportunity to basically jam my religion down his throat. And I would actually pull out my Bible, I'd pull out the Book of Mormon, and I'd start telling him like how wrong his religion was, and that it wasn't okay for his religion to make him feel that way, and all of this stuff. And I successfully dissuaded him from his religion. I didn't convert him to becoming a member of the LDS Church, but now he was no longer part of his religion. And I have regretted it for a really long time because I think that that religion was working for him. And this is kind of the message that I want to send to my students, is that if your religion works for you, then follow it. Okay? It's not a big deal. My basic rules when it comes to religion is that we need to respect each other, and that we have the right to believe whatever we want as long as what we're believing is not going to cause harm to other people. Okay? So if I want to believe in the flying spaghetti monster, I get to believe in the flying spaghetti monster. I don't get to tell people that they can't have specific medical procedures or interventions because my religion doesn't agree with those choices. This is a problem when we have people using their religion to dictate what other people get to do. We all have a right to follow the religion or to follow the belief system that works for us. And that means that if you don't believe that there is anything in the afterlife or that there is no higher power, then that's what works for you, and I don't have the right to tell you that you need to believe in something higher. If you want to turn your life over to God in whatever religion it is that you've chosen, then do it. I think, for the most part, that all religions have one basic tenet in common, and that's don't be a jerk, right? They are all encouraging you to better yourself, to have some introspection, to pray, to meditate, all of those things. Now, the reason I bring this up is because I do talk to my students about religion, and it's important for students to understand what their religions are and what their religious beliefs are, because those beliefs are going to drive some of their choices, right? Especially important when we are talking about birth control. All right, so the disclaimer that I give my students at the beginning of the birth control unit is that there are 7 categories of birth control, and in order to determine what methods are going to work for them, they need to understand what their cultural and religious beliefs are with regards to life and when it starts. They need to understand what is acceptable. So a lot of religions, and I will actually, as I'm going through each of the different methods of birth control, I'll talk about which religions they are most likely compatible with. So Some religions believe that even masturbation is sinful, and so that's going to exclude some of the methods of birth control, right? Um, so, for those of you who are curious, the 7 methods of birth control that I teach, or the 7 categories, are abstinence, of course, being the most effective. We talk about barrier methods, hormonal methods, sterilization. We do talk about abortion, and again, this is a very important decision for students to make as far as whether or not abortion would even be an option for them. We talk about the fertility awareness method, which tends to be the most religion compatible aside from abstinence. And then the last one that we talk about is withdrawal, which I am totally not a fan of, but which can make intercourse a little bit safer as far as preventing pregnancy. So I tell my students, think about it, talk to your family. What does your religion tell you if you are religious? What do you believe? And that's how they choose. Okay? And I think that, so if I haven't made it clear before, I think it's important for us to respect each other's religions, to respect each other's beliefs, whatever they may be, even if it is atheist, which means you don't believe in anything in the afterlife. We're here, and what we do is what we do, and then when we die, our bodies are gone. Okay? I'm pretty sure I'm not atheist. I would consider myself a lazy Buddhist witch, because when I was going through, when I had my gap between my first and second marriage, I actually was doing a lot of introspection. I was doing a lot of research as to what religions might be most compatible with my beliefs. And I found that those two really spoke to me. Buddhism is a little bit harder for me to practice rather than Wicca, because it's definitely more about letting go and having a peaceful mindset, which is a challenge for me. And then with Wicca, I'm lazy. I'm really lazy. Um, I could have gotten up and gone to church this morning at the First Unitarian Church here in Albuquerque, but that would have required me to get up and get changed and to get the kid ready and to go and to do all that stuff. And I really wasn't in the mood. So instead I went outside and pulled weeds, which have needed to be pulled for a very long time. Anyway, this is the Fat Health Teacher signing out. I wish you a good morning in whatever it is that you choose to do today. Thank you.